Good morning, everybody. It is 6 a.m. here on a couch in New York City, and welcome to the Thursday, July 25th, 2024 edition of Fox and Friends. Well, we're going to start with the big speech last night. President Biden at 8 o'clock last night, finally addressing the nation 3 days after he announced he would not seek re-election.
My record as president, my leadership in the world, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
Here's the problem. He never said why he dropped out. We're going to discuss that this morning as he passes the torch.
And this morning, former President Donald Trump will react live on Fox and Friends Live to Biden's address and how he plans to take on VP's Kamala Harris.
Plus, 23 protesters arrested as video shows anti-Israel groups burning the American flag, just as Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu called them out.
Tyrants of Tehran who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair are praising, promoting, and funding you. You have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
Katie Pavlich was there. Look at that. She saw it all, and she's going to join us in a few minutes.
Yep, she was in the room, plus the coronation versus the competition, and it continues. President Obama dragging his feet on endorsing Harris because he reportedly doesn't think she can win. And remember this?
That nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator. You supported the Green New Deal. You supported Medicare for all.
Yeah, the record's going to be interesting to play that back. Fox and Friends starts right now. Remember, your mornings are better with friends.
We start with a Fox News alert. Two major stories this morning in Washington. You have the anti-Israel protesters swarming the Capitol as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu addressed Congress.
Some of the protesters defaced monuments and fountains and things like that. They burned American flags. They burned Netanyahu in effigy, all in support of the terrorist organization that killed more than 1,200 innocent Israelis during the tragedies of October the 7th. You get the point.
And just a few hours later, President Biden finally speaking to the nation for the first time since he officially dropped out of the 2024 presidential race.
I revere this office, but I love my country more. It's been the honor of my life to serve as your president. But in the defense of democracy, which is at stake, I think it's more important than any title. I believe my record as president, my leadership in the world, my vision for America's future, all merited a second term. But nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation. Over the next 6 months, I'll be focused on doing my job as president. That means I'll continue to lower costs for hardworking families, grow our economy. I would like to thank our great Vice President Kamala Harris. She's experienced, she's tough, she's capable. She's been an incredible partner to me and a leader for our country. My fellow Americans, it's been the privilege of my life to serve this nation for over 50 years. The great thing about America is here, kings and dictators do not rule, the people do. History is in your hands. The power is in your hands.
You know, what's interesting, Brian and Ainsley and Lawrence, is we were told that the president would explain why he was dropping out. Essentially, what he said on camera was he dropped out to save democracy. Really, though, he dropped out because people in his party said, Joe, you can't win. You're going to take us all down. You've got to go. And finally, 5 days ago, he said he was all in. And then right after that, he's all out.
The staff was in the room with him. Family members were in the room. Many of them were crying. His grandchild, Finnegan, there's a picture that's being distributed of her hugging the president and wiping away the tears standing next to him. And Jill was the first one after he finished to come up and hug him. His daughter Ashley and his son Hunter were in there hugging him as well. And so was Mike Donnellan. We've talked about him a lot over the last week because he was the one who went to the beach house and met with the president. He's been with him since the very beginning of his political career, and they decided it was time for him to go.
Well, the thing that I took away from it was him saying to the American people, I promise to you that I would always be honest with you.
Yeah.
Yet in the speech, he's not being honest with us. Everyone knows, especially after that debate performance, comparing and contrasting him now versus 3 years ago, that there is something up with the president. We don't know the medical diagnosis. He won't release or won't get checked up. But we know something is wrong because we have relatives or people that we love and care about that has gone through something similar, same type of symptoms. We just don't know what it is. And so maybe I was being naive, but I thought at some point in the speech, he would level with the country and say, you know what? I lost a step. Things aren't going right, and for the good of the country, I'm deciding I'm not going to run again. I still think I got enough gas in me to finish the presidency, but just like many Americans, I'm old and some things have changed for me, but he didn't do that.
Yeah, the problem is if you want to look back in your career, you can do that, but do that after you're done with the White House. My emotions and my eyes aren't going to well up because at the same time we're seeing this, hours before the Chinese and Russians together breached our airspace at the same time. An hour before he took to the microphone, put on his lavalier, we had people at Union Station taking down our flag, wearing Hamas regalia, putting up the Palestinian flag, and there's been no retribution. 6 arrests, they're probably all out by now. So I see a country falling apart, and I see a guy that's presiding over it and needed 3.5 weeks to be convinced he's got to leave, and ultimately it's going to come out how they strong-armed him to go see the door. What Jill said tells a lot. She says this, to those who never wavered, to those who refused to doubt, to those who always believed, my heart is full of gratitude. You know what he's saying? To Fetterman and Clyburn, who stood by me along with Christopher Coons, you guys are the ones who stood there. For everyone else, from Nancy Pelosi to Barack Obama, who stabbed me in the back and pushed me out the door, for the good of the party, not the country, I'm not going to forgive you, I'm not going to forget. So then he ran off and did his subtle shots at President Trump, as if we're going to elect the next dictator, the next Mussolini, if he's in fact elected. So the whole thing was a bit of a campaign speech because he ran through everything he says he accomplished, what he's about to accomplish, all of which are impossible, and then what it's going to mean if he doesn't step aside, and that the world ends, the country ends, and that's Donald Trump getting elected.
But to Lawrence's point, Lawrence, he did say last night, quote, I promise to always level with you and tell you the truth.
And he proceeded to lie.
And you said yesterday, I guarantee he's going to say, I'm going to pass the torch.
Right.
And we all said he's going to say it's time for fresh voices, for younger voices, because that's the message they're going with now. Donald Trump, he put on his social media platform, he said, barely understandable, it was so bad, and goes on to say, if Kamala lies about Biden's mental status, she will lie about everything else too, never to be trusted.
Yeah, clearly he dropped out because the Democratic Party didn't want him anymore because he was going to drag them all down, and that's why he got
He couldn't win.
No, he couldn't. And the instant they went to him at 90 seconds after 8 o'clock last night, his face seemed frozen. He did not look healthy.
But Steve, I have a question for you.
I was reading some doctors analyzed he had a very low blink rate of his eyes and stuff like that. But Lawrence, to your point, we all thought he would explain why he gave it up. I lost a step or something like that. If he said that, then he would have to leave right then.
Yeah. But would he, if he did not do that debate, they would have known his condition and still would have stuck with him if he didn't do that debate. So they don't deserve praise for stepping in and saving the party, saving the country. And Joe Biden does deserve praise for stepping out. He had no choice, and after he got exposed, the party had no choice. Well, so there's nothing laudable about what happened.
Yeah, it's clear that they're going to keep the lie up, and
they've got to.
I think that they underestimate how furious even Democrats, people that like Joe Biden, are about being lied to. I mean, I told the story about the driver the other day who's a solid Democrat that says he saw something, but he didn't know it was that bad. Someone that's been following politics for a long time, Britt Hume, had a reaction to this. He says he's never seen anything like this. Watch.
Hear the president tell it. He was fine with running for re-election, thought he could win the race and serve for 4 more years until sometime between Saturday night and Sunday morning when it dawned on him, apparently, that it was time for a new generation of leaders. There was enough mention of democracy and the sacredness of it to suggest that there was more than a little political motivation in his speech, since democracy and the salvation of it has been such a theme of his and Kamala Harris's election program. But it was quite a conversion overnight, it seems, if you believe it. I'm not sure I do. I've been doing this for well more than half a century. In terms of news, this is the most tumultuous period I can think of. And, you know, I think when we all look back on this in the fullness of time, and perhaps with a better explanation of exactly the decision-making process the president went through, it will be seen as inevitable once that debate happened that he would have to step aside. The debate happened and everything else flowed from it except for one thing, and that was the attempted murder of Donald Trump.
After the debate, the Democrats were panicking, and Republicans were saying, this is amazing, Donald Trump's going to win. And then the Democrats chose to push him out.
Yeah.
Then they select Kamala Harris, and now they're saying, thank goodness for that debate, because now we have a candidate that could,
while still saying that he's going to protect democracy. That's my favorite part.
Right.
You guys have had an entire process where no votes were cast for the nominee.
No primary for Kamala Harris.
No primary at all, and no votes. But when she ran the first time, she didn't even make it to the first primary. And you guys still want to say protect democracy? There's nothing democratic about this process.
I think he's mispronouncing it. It's not protecting democracy. He's saying protecting Democrats, ultimately. So what he did at the end was he wound up giving a non-campaign campaign speech, talking about what he's going to do over the next 6 months. Last night we saw the very beginning of the very long Joe Biden goodbye.
And Benjamin Netanyahu gave an amazing speech to Congress yesterday. It was so powerful. He introduced some of the hostages, the young lady who was taken from the festival, and she was on the motorcycle. She was there standing next to his wife, and to see her alive. And he told us such a touching story. He said her mother was dying of cancer, and he met with her, and the mother said, my dying wish, my last wish, I have to hug my daughter one more time before I pass away. And she was able to do that.
And that brings us to this. It's a Fox News alert. Anti-Israeli protesters raging in our nation's capital yesterday, proudly showing their support for Hamas while burning the American flag during Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's visit to D.C.
United States.
Look at this. Allah Akbar. God is great. This is the things
How do you
that
explain this to your kids? My daughter last night's watching this with me, and she said, Mama, are they burning the American flag?
Yeah.
I had to talk about the war and her grandfathers and what my dad did in the service.
And that in this country, that is protected speech, burning the flag.
So those
sadly.
protesters replacing the American flag with the Palestinian flag above Union Station. Meanwhile, Netanyahu making his message to them very clear.
Well, I have a message for these protesters. When the tyrants of Tehran, who hang gays from cranes and murder women for not covering their hair, are praising, promoting, and funding you, you have officially become Iran's useful idiots.
I love that he didn't back off, soft pedal, and talk about freedom of speech. They are useful to our enemy, idiots. Our next guest was there, watching in horror as the monuments were defaced with Hamas's coming spray painted on them. Fox News contributor Katie Pavlich attended Netanyahu's speech yesterday and joins us. First off, let's begin with the protest. When you're watching that at Union Station, when you see these people with Hamas regalia on, of course, covering their face, as well as burning our flag, what are your thoughts?
Well, first I had to walk by them at the beginning of the day to get into the Capitol, and there were barriers everywhere to keep them out. The New York Police Department sent in hundreds of officers to try and help with backup. And then I went into the speech, and Benjamin Netanyahu was talking about the fight against evil, on the behalf of good, praising the United States and the shared values that we have going all the way back to the beginning of our country, praising the UNC fraternity brothers who saved their flags. And then I leave the chamber at the U.S. Capitol and walk just a couple of blocks into this, where it doesn't look like the streets of the United States, it looks like the streets of Tehran or Gaza. People need to understand that the only American flags that you saw yesterday among this crowd were the ones that they took down from the flagpoles outside of Union Station, a historic place in America, in the nation's capital, and then they burned them and replaced them with a foreign terrorist flag. And people like President Joe Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris down the street of Pennsylvania Avenue have nothing to say about it. I mean, the monuments outside, the Freedom Bell in the plaza, are completely vandalized and destroyed. And this isn't just about anti-Israel. If you look at what they wrote on all of the monuments and everything, it says Hamas is coming, you know, profanity against the United States, horrible, awful things about America. And so this is what you're seeing. And it's a combination of well, that's a good question. And I think the Department of Justice should take a look at whether they want to prosecute these people. There were some arrests, but of course they just let them out and they go do this again. They're showing up in buses. Who is funding this? Right. And, you know, according to the federal law through the Department of Justice, this kind of destruction can land you in prison for 10 years and a $250,000 fine.
Katie,
there should be prosecutions of this, because if not, it will continue.
In this video, we just saw a young man in a suit, and he took off his blazer and started trying to put the fire out over the American flag, and someone in the crowd pushes him back. They didn't want him to be able to extinguish the flames.
Also, we should point out that after those three flags were taken down, Speaker Mike Johnson was approached by a member of Congress, a Republican member of Congress, and said, "Hey, Mr. Speaker, I just drove by Union Station. There are Palestinian flags down there flying." And so the Speaker and the Congressman went down, and as you can see right there, they raised 3 American flags instead. Kind of reminds us of what we saw in North Carolina a couple of months ago. And there you can see the members of Congress saluting the U.S. flags, Katie, being restored to their proper places.
Well, this reminds me a lot of the BLM riots of summer of 2020. And it's a choice to allow this kind of behavior to continue. And they were the most destructive, violent riots we've had in the history of the country. And now you're seeing Summer of Love 2.0 with this pro-Hamas, pro-Islamic terrorism wave that has hit the country, that's been accepted by a number of leaders inside the Democratic Party. And so you're seeing it all over your screen, what was going on yesterday. They burned the American flag. They were screaming at anybody. They're fighting with the police. The police had to deploy a number of different options against this violent crowd. And so I think people need to wake up when you have a foreign terrorist flag worn by Hamas terrorists in the Gaza Strip, who are still holding 8 American hostages, being foisted up in America's capital city. I mean, this would be wrong if this happened anywhere, but this is Washington, D.C., a place where every American should come and feel safe and be able to visit their own monuments. And this is what you're seeing outside 2 blocks from the U.S. Capitol in Washington, D.C.
And there was a big walkout too of congressional workers, congressional staff too.
And Rashida Tlaib holding up that protest sign, and it said on one side war criminal, on the other guilty of genocide. While Benjamin Netanyahu speaking, she's sitting in Congress holding up this sign.
Katie, thanks so much for joining
the program. Only people who want a genocide are the people who showed up at this rally and the people in Gaza.
Yeah, we got to decide if we want a country or not, and if we're going to defend the terrorist cells that have decided to come. And don't ask me if they are or not. When they're promoting Hamas and being funded by the #1 state sponsor of terrorists. We got Donald Trump live on Fox and Friends coming up on 7:30. I wonder what his thoughts.
Yeah, but that is a choice. This is part of the election. Kamala Harris showed you she didn't care. And if she's elected, nothing will be done. Maybe it'll be even supported, finance. And on the other hand, I'm pretty sure Donald Trump passed a law that says it made it a crime to defile these monuments.
That's where we're going to pick up, Brian. Meanwhile, Vice President Kamala Harris has set to rally teachers in Texas today after addressing black voters in Indiana yesterday.
All right, Lucas Tomlinson is joining us right now with more on the Vice President's push for the White House. Lucas.
Well, good morning, Steve. Vice President Kamala Harris was a no-show for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's address to Congress yesterday. Instead, she spoke to a sorority in Indiana.
I believe we face a choice between 2 different visions for our nation. One focused on the future, the other focused on the past. And with your support, I am fighting for our nation's future.
Now, NBC reports former President Barack Obama plans to endorse Harris soon. Here's a list of the betting favorites for the vice president to choose to be her running mate. That list includes Mark Kelly, Josh Shapiro, Andy Beshear, Roy Cooper, and others. It's notable back in 2020, Mark Kelly received over 44,000 more votes in his Senate race in Arizona than Joe Biden received that year on the state ballot. If Harris is going to have a challenger for the nomination, it needs to happen soon. The DNC Rules Committee has issued a July 30 deadline for candidates to collect delegate signatures. The virtual roll call must be completed by August 7th. Now, GovTrack, which tracks congressional voting records, listed Kamala Harris the most liberal senator in 2019. Yesterday in Charlotte, former President Donald Trump accused the vice president of being to the left of Bernie Sanders.
Kamala Harris is the most liberal elected politician in American history. Did you know that? She's an ultra-liberal politician. She's absolutely terrible. She's, as you know, more liberal than Bernie Sanders. Can you believe it? She's rated far more liberal than Bernie Sanders. And she's now trying to get rid of her record.
Now, it's notable that GovTrack website listing Kamala Harris as the most liberal senator in 2019 was recently taken down. The company tells our colleagues at Fox Digital it ended its policy of, quote, several years ago and of making single-year rankings. Now do it for the congressional term, 2 years. Guys?
Okay, Lucas, thank you very much. Lucas just mentioned a couple of the names being considered for vice president. Karen Tumulty, the D.C. correspondent who's been down there a long time, she tweeted this out. I just received the following, quote, I am honored to have been considered as a possible running mate for Vice President Harris. However, there are far better candidates, and I have removed my name from consideration. You know who said that? Admiral William McRaven yesterday. Apparently, she was interested in him being a hero as her vice president.
Yeah. Mark Kelly's on that short list. It looks also like Governor Shapiro on that short list. Beshear doesn't seem to be on that short list, and Governor Whitmer doesn't seem interested in that, but Governor Pritzker does. Tim Walz was on our channel thinking very happy. And then I hear this. Pete Buttigieg, the failed transportation director and subpar mayor.
So as we go through who's going to be her vice presidential pick, a lot of stuff is coming out about Kamala Harris, especially her liberal record. Here's a flashback from 2020.
You're considered the most liberal United States senator.
Somebody said that, and it actually was Mike Pence on the debate stage. But
yeah, well, actually, the nonpartisan GovTrack has rated you as the most liberal senator. You supported the Green New Deal. You supported Medicare for all. You've supported legalizing marijuana.
Republican senators are saying they know her very well. They worked with her as a senator, and she was so liberal, even more liberal than Bernie Sanders, if you look at her record.
We'll see. Sean did a great monologue yesterday with all of these different sound bites of her record saying some outrageous stuff. That is going to be the key in this election.
Re-examining ICE, banning offshore drilling. No question I'm in favor of banning fracking. Medicare for all, even illegals. No restrictions on abortions. Illegal immigration is not a crime. No more private health insurance. She said, let's eliminate all of that. Let's move on. And when AOC promoted 70 to 80% tax rate, Kamala says she is challenging the status quo, and that's fantastic. Introducing bold ideas, and that should be discussed.
On The View, because she was making up policies on the fly, judging by questions. Speaking about it on the fly, yesterday on this very couch, I was wearing a different outfit, same shoes for the record. No, actually different shoes. I was wearing black shoes.
Good to know.
So, yeah, just for the record, we were talking about why Kamala Harris would not choose to be behind Benjamin Netanyahu. She has an opportunity to look like a president, as a vice president, preside over a joint session of Congress. Instead, she went to give a speech to a sorority, to a college sorority. Somebody else thought I said a different word. So while I'm doing radio around 9:20, I start getting a bunch of text messages about what's going on online. And then I see Lawrence cut and pasted what you put up. And people thought I had a disparaging racial word instead of saying college sorority. So this ends up being this big thing. And it turns out the person who did it is head of the Washington Correspondents Association, and he's a Politico guy who does Playbook every day. I ended up speaking to him at the end of the day, and that conversation will remain private. But they walked it back, they corrected it. But it didn't stop for 4 or 5 hours. People like Jamie Harrison, head of the DNC, calling me a clown, making racial accusations my direction. People all across the country just see the headline, start throwing things out. It disparages me, disparages his company. And I give special credit to people like you, Lawrence, for media relations, for going aggressively, Media-Eye for coming back, Dana Perino for weighing in, you guys also, Janice Dean, for people, Megyn Kelly, people just all of a sudden, I was trying to do the radio show, listening to these live press conferences, trying to get the FBI, and I didn't really realize how big this was until I got off. But then I went to Outnumbered yesterday while I'm going through this, and I'm seeing how big this became. And I just think it's a learned moment for everyone on the couch, everyone watching. From now on, things have changed. Yeah. Since Kamala Harris is running, they were looking to label anyone, anytime, a racist, sexist, misogynist. I'm not going to back off anything I say. I think it was a huge mistake of going to a college sorority instead of the Prime Minister's address. And I'm not going to apologize for it, but people who are in the media should be responsible when they report things.
Well, Brian, I started the show off yesterday warning Americans that this will be the most intense racialized election there is, and they're going to use it, anything that we say, even if it's true or not true. The sad part is I don't know if there's this massive conspiracy that they think that Fox is just ran just by white people. We have crew members here, people in the control room that are black. We were all on set yesterday, and I think it's insulting to all of us that if something like that were said on here, that we would just all be cool with it. That's not the way that it's worked.
And that's what he wrote about you. He said, as a black man,
as a black man,
sat there as
why would you sit there and let it happen? The reason why I sat there, because Brian said college, and then right after the thing that was missed about that conversation, there was a spirited conversation after that between our stage manager saying this is why she decided to go to there. There's voters there. But all of that was missed in the moment because they wanted to run with the lie. And by the way, the damage has already been done. I mean, these clips are still floating around in my community and everywhere of people saying that it's okay.
By the way, your name is Lawrence Jones. Correct. Not the black man on the couch.
Correct.
All right? And that's the other thing.
And you challenged him to a debate.
Yeah, we would love to have the DNC chair to share his ideas on Fox and Friends, debate it out, see what he's doing, what his party is doing for the country. We'd love to see him.
And just for the record, I just spent the last 6 years studying Booker T. Washington, and sitting there, the president and freedom fighter, and Frederick Douglass. Do you think for a second I would even use that word for the 1930s, nor would I ever be insensitive enough to even think it on the couch?
We know you very well, Brian. No, you would not.
And we all heard you say college. It was as clear as day. And now you have, I'm
not going to bring it up again.
Right. You've settled it. Thanks. He said college. All right. We have all gone to college, and now we are going to a commercial, and Newt Gingrich is coming up.
In recent weeks, it's become clear to me that I need to unite my party in this critical endeavor, but nothing can come in the way of saving our democracy. That includes personal ambition. So I've decided the best way forward is to pass the torch to a new generation.
Okay, we thought he would say that, and he did, but that was about it. The president finally addressing the nation 3 days after ending his re-election bid on Sunday as the White House defends his fitness to finish the term.
So today, the president believes that he is fully capable of serving in the office that he currently has now and for the next 4.5 years if he wanted to.
Absolutely.
Who ordered White House officials to cover up a declining president?
It is not a cover-up. I know that is the narrative that you all want. It is not.
Okay. Here with reaction, former Speaker of the House and Fox News contributor Newt Gingrich. Newt, good morning to you.
Good morning.
So there was no cover-up. Behind the scenes, he's still sharp as a tack.
Well, look, the key part of the speech that you just played is purely and simply a lie. He didn't decide to get out for the good of the country. He had Nancy Pelosi and Barack Obama orchestrating an all-out attack that would have destroyed him in the next week or two. This is a coup d'etat. We've never seen anything like it in American history. This is a group of bosses who decided that 14,500,000 Democrats in the primaries were wrong, that Joe Biden was no longer worthy of their approval, and that they were going to impose a San Francisco radical, which for Pelosi makes sense. To say anything else is just not to be honest with the American people. So Biden's farewell address was a dishonest one. It's not true what he said. It wasn't some grand decision. He got out because he knew that Pelosi and Obama in the next week or so were going to beat his brains out. And so this literally was like Venezuela or Russia or somewhere else. This was a coup against a freely elected sitting president on behalf of replacing him with a San Francisco radical. And the coup was led by a San Francisco radical in Pelosi.
Yeah. You know, Newt, for those who watched the channel yesterday, you saw the President of the United States, and you saw him at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern Time. Earlier in the day, though, you saw Benjamin Netanyahu from the well of the House of Representatives speaking to a joint session of Congress who were all there. And, you know, when you compare and contrast Netanyahu's cognitive behavior and his physicality with Biden's, you just think, what happened to Joe Biden? That guy who gave that speech last night is not the guy even who was sworn in 3.5 years ago.
Well, I think that became just frighteningly obvious in the debate with Trump. Callista and I were watching it, and we thought maybe Biden would make 1 or 2 or 3 mistakes. But from the moment we tuned in, that very opening answer, it was clear you were dealing with somebody who cognitively had declined to a point where they were incoherent and they were incompetent. And I think if you had a split screen and you looked at the directness, the toughness, and also the thoughtfulness of Netanyahu, and then you looked at the vapidity and the lack of energy of Biden, it's just unbelievable, the gap in the two.
Indeed. All right. Newt, thank you very much for joining us live on this Thursday.
Sure.
retired Air Force colonel and a Texas ranch owner, and joins us now. Lon, good morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us. You live in a remote part of Texas. You own a ranch there, and you've been greatly impacted by this illegal immigration crisis. Tell us how.
Yes, that's correct. And good morning.
Good morning.
Tell us how you've been impacted by this illegal immigration situation.
Well, prior to about 3 years or so ago, there was essentially nothing. But of late, there's been a lot more traffic. And I can tell there's been more traffic by the amount of trash that I have to pick up on my property. And also, when the illegals come over, they need water. And so the closest water source there to me is these water tanks and water lines that go over my property, which is fine. I don't want to give anybody you don't want to give them a chance to have a drink of water, but then they don't reconnect the lines and it drains all of the water out of my storage tanks. That's a problem.
And we're showing footage of it. Your house is also broken into. Tell us about that.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's oddly enough, I have a security system there, and I was here in D.C., and I was just happened to be looking at my phone, and I see this activity around. I said, what the heck is this? So I immediately called the local Border Patrol station in Comstock, Texas, talked to a colleague of mine that says, hey, can you help me out here? I think we're experiencing a break-in. And it's just by luck. They happened to be visiting the ranch next to me, and they just made a beeline for my place, and they got there very quickly, I would say within 20 minutes. And they were able to witness the break-in itself and apprehend the person breaking in.
And when you see footage like that, you wonder, that's not law and order. In 2021, VP Harris was assigned to lead efforts with Mexico and the northern Honduras Triangle countries to stem the migration to our southern border. And the result of that, within 3 years, over 7.8 million migrants crossed into the U.S. How can Kamala, sir, run as the law and order president when she ignores the immigration laws on the books, leading to situations like you saw in your ranch, and there's no order in the cities and towns overrun by illegal migrants? Seems like there's no law and order there at all under Kamala Harris, sir.
Well, I think there's kind of a misnomer when you say the border is open. It's not that the border is open. There's a huge vacuum cleaner on our side of the border sucking people in for whatever the reasons. I'm not sure that all the political affiliations and everything, but I can tell you it's very disturbing, and I certainly wish it would stop. And we didn't have this problem before, and we do now.
Yeah, over the past 3.5 years, really quickly too, you got about 15 seconds left. How much has it changed?
Well, the volume of traffic, and then the number of people that will actually come to my house and knock on the door and ask for assistance, which I always give them, of course. It's significant.
Significant. Well, Lon, we thank you so much for joining us. We also thank you so much for your service.
Absolutely.
We're sorry what you're going through.